right, guys, it's so great to see you. My name is Fiona Riley. If this is your first time joining us, I just want to give you a quick hello. We're so happy to have you here. This is the end of the Bold Strokes Bookathon, the winter edition. And like I said, we're thrilled you guys have been here. Thank you for supporting us, and we're going to get started. So each one of the authors today, myself included, have a book coming out soon or just came out, and we're going to do a quick reading from that. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about our books and answer any questions you might have. Okay, so why don't we have Jesse kick us off? And again, just mute yourselves, authors, and take your video off so we can make sure Jesse is the star of the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to be reading from Courage, which is my current release. And this is the second book that's set sort of in the same universe, although it's a standalone. The first one is Serenity. So I'm going to be reading a section where we meet one of our main characters, Natasha. She's a social worker, and she's in the scene, she's talking with her best friend. She's about to start her new job as a ride-along mental health clinician at a police department. And it's the night before she starts her job, so she's a little bit nervous. So she's having dinner with her friend and talking about her job the next day. What if you get shot? Natasha looked at her best friend, Kayla, who was fretting at Natasha's kitchen island, but trying to hide her worry. She was surprised at the concern, not because she thought Kayla didn't care. She just never really considered the danger of her new job. I'm pretty sure they'll give me a bulletproof vest, Kay. You know, it's called a vest for a reason, Nat. There's still a lot of you someone could hit and do damage, like your head. And as hard-headed as you are, I don't think your skull is bulletproof. What would I do without you? No one would dare shoot at this. Natasha waved her hand in front of her face dramatically. Yeah, right, not until you open your mouth. Why are you worried about people shooting me now? I piss people off all the time. No one's taken a shot yet. Kayla looked at her like she should already know the answer. Because everybody you'll be working with will have a gun? Except you, which I endorse, by the way. You with a gun in your hand scares me more than just about anything else in the world, which is saying a lot. There's some scary shit out there. You know, when I invited you over to help me prepare for my first day tomorrow, this wasn't quite what I had in mind. It was actually exactly what she had in mind, and she knew Kayla knew it too. She was a little nervous about reporting for duty in the morning, and an evening filled with Kayla knocking the wind out of her sails was soothing. It was kind of their routine. Fine, tell me more about this fancy new job then. Well, you know I'll be working for the police department. They hired me to ride along as a mental health clinician, so I'll head out on calls where it's suspected that mental health or substance use related issues are at play, and then they'll let me loose to work my magic. Natasha dusted off her shoulders for effect. Oh, so you'll be like the police dog they let out when they need it? Will you get a special handle in the back so you can let yourself out, or will your cop buddy have to open the door for you? Why am I friends with you again? Natasha threw her most devastating side-eye Kayla's way. Kayla's, oh, bitch, please, look, neutralized anything Kayla could throw back. Kayla could slay any challenger with a raised eyebrow. What do your parents think of this new career path? Kayla said it casually, but as soon as it was out of her mouth, the air was heavy with suitcases full of unpacked baggage. You know my parents care about money and power, just like their whole circle of wealthy friends. They haven't been interested in Natasha Parsons in years. You can change your name, but I'm not sure you'll ever stop being Natasha Blackstone. She's dead as far as I'm concerned. Natasha set her wine glass down harder than she meant to. This place doesn't look like it was purchased by a dead woman. Kayla waved vaguely around the room. You've got money, who cares? You do good with it. If I were you, I'd spend it a lot differently than you do. As if your family doesn't run in the same circles as mine. And if you could, you'd walk down Main Street with $100 bills shoved in your bra so you could pull them out and shower the masses. Who says I haven't already checked that off my bucket list? Oh, please, you would have invited me. And then, Natasha hesitated, it would have ended up in the tabloids most likely. Kayla had known her long enough to know the price that came with the Blackstone name. What if you tried not hiding Miss Parsons for once? Can we put some firecrackers on your tits and get you trending on every news outlet's social media feed? Recovering socialite is now a social worker extraordinaire. Seriously, why am I friends with you? Natasha threw the wine bottle cork at Kayla, who caught it effortlessly and set it on the counter. Because I love you, and I'm proud of you. Kayla was still all business. If there's someone out there who needs help, they couldn't have a better advocate than you. Natasha fiddled with a loose piece of paper on her counter. Forget my parents. God, Kay, what if I screw this up? Not possible. You've kicked ass at every job you've ever had. Even that summer when we were 10 and you decided to be a newspaper delivery girl, but you really sucked at riding a bike. I don't know, this feels different somehow. Is it the guns and the fact that you'll be working with cops, given what happened with Joseph? Yeah, a little. If I screw up, someone could get shot. You said you weren't getting shot. No, no, not me. I meant the people I'm trying to help. Hasn't that always been true, though? You're a social worker who chooses to work with addicted and mentally ill clients who are in like ultimate crisis mode. If you screw up something, and even if you didn't, there's a chance that one of your clients could have died by police hands, even if you weren't involved, right? Natasha could think of one headlight grabbing case that played out exactly as Kayla described. She hadn't screwed anything up. It wasn't even her client that was killed, but it easily could have been. It would be different, Kay, watching it happen right in front of me instead of hearing about it the next day. Kayla reached across the kitchen island and entwined their hands. I know that, sweetie, but don't do anything stupid like throw yourself in the line of fire thinking one lousy vest is going to protect your ass. When have I ever done something reckless and stupid? Kayla raised her eyebrow. Nat, I'm serious. Okay, I promise to be careful. Natasha reclaimed her hand and put their glasses in the sink. She didn't want Kayla to see her doubts. Was that even a promise she could keep?
That sounds good. I'm excited. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. When does your book come out?
It came out April 1st.
Yes.
You can get it now.
Get it now. Get it now. There's a link on the chat roll. All right. So guys, why don't we go into, let's have Jane go next. She's back. Hey, Jane.
Because I turned my video on faster.
Jane's first. Tell us about your book. Tell us about you and give us the reading of a lifetime. I'm ready.
Sure. My book is called The Queen Has a Cold, and it's a royal romance between an American graduate student, Sam, and an intersex heir to a fictional throne, Remy, who is non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. And they're both starting graduate school in Boston. They've just met in the parking lot of their graduate apartments where Remy accidentally broke Sam's lamp. So as an apology, they've offered to take her to dinner and buy her a replacement. And I should say that at this point, Sam has lied to Remy and said she has a boyfriend because she feels a slight interest in them and doesn't want to be distracted from her studies. Once Sam said she was with someone else, the evening felt a little sour and much less interesting to Remy. They contemplated veering from the plan to go to dinner and instead buying a lamp and being done with it. Or better yet, they could order one online and have it shipped to her. But Remy, who had bristled at much of their upbringing, had nonetheless internalized the idea of being gracious. If Sam had a boyfriend, Remy would respect that. But they had promised to buy her dinner, and they would do that too. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Remy realized they didn't know much about Boston and only had a vague idea where to go based on scouring maps online before moving. They'd looked up plenty to do and see and had made a mental note of a couple of restaurants to try. In some parts of Europe, Remy wouldn't have needed a reservation if they gave the host their last name. But they doubted their family name carried any clout in the United States. That was the point of moving here, wasn't it? Sam didn't seem like the type of person to be impressed by Michelin stars and immediate seating. She would probably feel uncomfortable, and neither of them was suitably dressed. What would make someone like Sam comfortable, Remy wondered. At a red light, Remy pulled their phone out to look up a recommendation and access a map without Sam seeing it. She was being remarkably quiet, neither asking questions nor protesting their aimless journey, and Remy wondered if she found their company tolerable after all. Boston's best lobster rolls for cheap, the website declared. That was perfect. Remy had never had a lobster roll and wasn't even sure what it was, but they enjoyed lobster, and if it was the regional specialty, it would be fun to try. Okay, I found a place, they announced. This is going to be great. 10 minutes later, they pulled onto a busy street. There were cars parked on one side next to the curb, but parking wasn't something Remy had yet practiced. Doing it in a brand new car with Sam in the passenger seat was too intimidating. They passed the cheap storefront restaurant, and down the block was a fancier place that had a valet out front. Remy eased as close to the curb as they could manage and put the car in park. The valet opened Sam's door as she unbuckled her seatbelt. Her eyes sparkled. Wow, this looks really nice. Remy frowned as they got out and handed the keys to the valet. Yes, it does. I was actually thinking we'd go over there, though. They pointed down the street where the forest green awning gave way to scaffolding over a glass storefront with faded pictures of food in the window. They could see Sam's disappointment. We don't have to. I thought you might prefer. I've never tried lobster rolls, and I thought it might be fun. Would you be embarrassed to be seen with me in a nice restaurant? Sam asked. Absolutely not. Do you only spend money on people you think are worthy? Or is it because I said I'm dating someone and therefore I don't deserve a nice dinner? It has nothing to do with that, Remy argued. Well, so what is it then? This is your way of testing someone to see if they're only interested in you because of your wealth? No, please stop making these assumptions. Remy realized what Sam had said and paused. They looked at her. She was huffy, clearly displeased with the choice of a cheaper restaurant, but it was more than wanting a night out at Remy's expense. They could see more complicated feelings lurking under the surface. Are you interested in me? Do I need to test your motives? I have a boyfriend. There was something about the way she said it that made Remy skeptical. Probably her insistence. When Remy's best friend Pierre seduced women who were already in relationships, their protests were usually half-hearted. They'd mumble the words they knew they were supposed to say but didn't want to. Sam was defiant. Do you really? They stared at her until her icy glare cracked. Her cheeks glowed in the warmth of the streetlight. No. Do you even date men? Sam rolled her eyes, but was smiling as she admitted, no. The smile told Remy everything, and they reciprocated. They held out a hand. Please allow me to buy you a lobster roll, and if you want, tomorrow I will take you somewhere with more gourmet food. Remy counted in their head. Un, deux, and it wasn't until trois that Sam put an end to the flutter of nerves in Remy's stomach when she put her hand in theirs. Thank you.
That's so cute. Oh my God, I love lobster rolls. I would have been thrilled by that. Oh, that's awesome. When is your book out?
Oh, it came out this month, so it's already available.
Times are wasting. People start getting it. Go get your book now. All right, great. The link's off to the side. All right, Genevieve, you ready? You're up next.
Okay. My book is A Fae Tale. It came out this month. Devana and Rosa are the main characters. They met when they were 6. Devana is a girl from Lithuania, and Rosa is a Laume, a type of Lithuanian fae. They became fast friends, but when Devana got home, Rosa disappeared and they never saw each other again. But Devana would leave her food as a present along with a letter, and Rosa would leave gold in return with a letter of her own. It's now 15 years later, and Devana has realized that there has to be a reason Rosa is avoiding her, while Rosa is asking her grandmother for advice. Even as a Laume travels, my grandmother's home is a long trek. It takes me hours to find her secluded little abode, a damp, dark cave affixed with all sorts of magical accoutrements. I've never been quite certain if she keeps them because she actually uses them, or because they add the appearance she wants for when humans see it. About halfway in, I find her, ever the picture of an old hag, stirring some sort of cauldron. I wonder what's in it. Rosa, is that you? She asked without turning around. I stop a few meters away, not sure what to say. I need her advice. Badly, but I can't risk giving everything away. Yes, grandmother. She turns, a warm smile on her face as she beckons. She's more hunched than I recall, but she always looked aged, even when I was a newborn. Come in, come in. I've nearly finished fixing stew. Are you hungry? It was a long walk. I would appreciate it. Sit, sit. She clears beakers, a mortar and pestle, and pages of notes from a table and pulls out an old chair, the once black paint showing the wood beneath it. I do as she tells me. Thank you. The stirring resumes, and she seems to lose track of time, not bothering to say any more. I'm not sure if I should ask her something. She's much more insightful than me. I'd rather not risk her finding out what I want to avoid. That should do it. She shakes a large canister of salt over the pot and scoops out the contents with 2 healthy-sized bowls. Now, where am I going to sit? She ponders. I start to stand. Don't you dare. You've been walking all day. Relax. She waddles off and returns a few minutes later holding a stool. Again, waving me off when I try to help her, she sets it before the table and moves more of her equipment. Now, where were we? I believe you wanted my advice? Something to do with the future? We haven't had that part of the conversation yet, grandmother, I mutter. She always gets so confused. Sometimes I fear that I'll be like that too if I give in to my powers the same way she has. Ah, right. She raises the stew to her lips, taking a deep sip of hot broth. Ah, perfect. Is it not to your liking? I take a sip and end up draining half the bowl before I'm finished. Wow, I was hungrier than expected. No, it's great. I'm glad to hear that. So you just got here? Yes. Then I ask what it is you want, and you tell me what your mother told you to come, that your mother told you to come here. Traditionally, I would supply my own response. She chuckles, swirling her stew. Oh, but there's no meat on your bones. Let me get you some food. You already did. She glances at my stew. More then. She approaches the unattended cauldron with my bowl and tops it off before setting it back on the table. Much better. Thank you, grandmother. Hello, Rosa. It's good to see you. Your mother must have sent you. I nod. It's nice to see you as well. But that doesn't mean that it won't work. What? She shakes her head. I haven't offered the first suggestion yet, have I? You said you were trying to change the future. What have you seen that so troubles you? Has she already seen my answer? Of course, I wouldn't tell her, not yet anyway. She'd have to have seen it from some far-off future when it's no longer relevant. And she doesn't like to skip that far ahead if she can avoid it. It's nothing like that. My interest is purely theoretical. That's never true. What's the worry? Well, she'll likely forget that I didn't answer if I just press on. There's a future that I've been trying to alter for over a decade. No matter what I do, the end result is the same, and I've merely delayed it. Can fate really be immutable? If anyone would know how to change a destiny that stubborn, it would be you, right, grandmother? She sips her stew as she considers, or possibly considers calling out my avoiding her question. Some futures are not so malleable, like death, or love, or even some bad stew. It's not about the importance of the event, it's about the likelihood of it. Everyone will die, most people will find love, and everyone will eat bad stew. Right, I agree hesitantly. She finishes and lets the empty bowl fall to the floor. Maybe she thought she'd already put it away. Say, for instance, that your dear friend was in an abusive relationship. You may have seen a future where he killed her, or perhaps a she rather than a he. Humans tend to those odd choices as much as they tend toward killing. It's best not to judge them. I think we can judge in that situation. For the murder, perhaps, but not for going back to her. No matter how you try to change the future, there's nothing that can guarantee that she'll free herself. The best you can do is offer a supportive environment. But until she decides that she's willing to move on, not even the gods themselves could tell her otherwise. I'm not sure I understand. No one is in an abusive relationship. The stew, then. You can tell her that she won't like it, but until she tastes it, it won't change a thing. If you were to take all of her ingredients in pots, that would only delay it. Someday, she'll eat that terrible stew you so fear. Not even your sight can prevent that, my dear child. I sigh. Did that answer my question? I'm not sure, but I really want some stew now, with honey bread. Or just the honey bread. Thank you.
I think I want some stew and some honey bread. That sounds great. I want someone to make me stew and then tell me about the future. I need a grandmother like this. That sounds fantastic. And your book came out this month?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So you know where to go, readers. Check it out. The link's off to the right. All right. So I'm last because that's what happens. So I'm going to do a quick reading and then we're going to do a Q&A. So I want you to start firing some questions over to that Q&A box for me. And then we're going to go over them together. Okay. So I will be reading from Bet the Farm, which is the second book in my high stakes romance series. And though it is a standalone, it is sort of a continuation of the first book in time. So this is Lauren's story. The first book was Bet Against Me that came out in September, and this is Lauren's side. So the book starts with Lauren celebrating her best friend's brand new win for Realtor of the Year and also a new relationship. So Lauren herself is doing okay. She's had a couple of major business falls. She's had some big deals fall through at the last second, and she's feeling really underwhelmed with her performance. And she's here celebrating her best friend winning Realtor of the Year. In addition to that, her best friend has found new love. And then aside from their little one-on-one thing they've always had going on as best friends, now she sort of feels like a third wheel because her best friend is moving in with her girlfriend and they have this whole thing going. So not only is she failing professionally where she would hopefully be successful, she's also feeling unlucky in love. And they're all at a bar right now celebrating the big win. They just came from the ceremony, and she's sort of feeling a little disconnected from the joy. The other main character you're going to meet in this is Thea Boudreau, and Thea is celebrating or commiserating with her friend. She's at the bar with her best friend, Avni, and she's there because she got some really bad news. Thea's family farm in Maine is going to go up for sale. Her mother isn't able to keep it running anymore, and even though Thea left after her dad died many years ago, she still goes back on the weekends and visits, but she no longer works at the farm, and the cost of the maintenance of the farm has become too much, and it has become apparent they're going to have to sell it. And Thea's not sure what that means for her and who she is without the legacy of the farm that's been around for 3 generations. So she just got that news, and she's been avoiding calling her mom back. So she's sort of drowning her sorrows in a cocktail. And the scene we're going to read right now is Avni just left Thea alone at the bar, and Lauren's going up to get drink refills for her friends. And maybe things get exciting. We're just going to have to go see. Bad first date. Thea turned to find an attractive woman surveying her curiously. Her long, dirty blonde hair was up in a stylish twist, and a perfectly penciled eyebrow was raised in Thea's direction. No? What makes you ask that? Thea turned to face her, appreciating the sexy black dress she was wearing and the green necklace that complemented her hazel eyes. Well, she left in a hurry, with her drink still half full next to you, the sexy mystery woman said as she pointed to Avni's forgotten drink. That's alcohol abuse, or bad manners, or you just really offended her. Because even on a bad date, I've never left a half-full glass. What makes you think I offended her? Thea asked, charmed by this woman's forwardness. The well-manicured middle finger in your direction, she said with a shrug. Thea laughed. She's my work bestie, and her boyfriend had an embarrassing emergency, so she had to split. But I appreciate the narrative you concocted. It's quite imaginative. I've been known to have a vivid imagination, she said. I'm glad to hear you weren't just dumped on the spot. I was feeling bad for you. Well, she did leave me with a full drink and no company, Thea reasoned, in no rush to stop talking to this woman. I'd be interested in hearing more about this imagination of yours, if you'd like to join me. She seemed to consider this. She glanced over her shoulder, and Thea realized she must be with the coworker group Tegan mentioned. Oh, you're with the fancily dressed people in the back, right? They probably wouldn't miss you for a few minutes. Thea motioned for the bartender to come over. Can I buy you a drink? Sure, she smiled. Great. Thea pulled out the chair next to her, pushing Avni's abandoned cocktail towards the back of the bar. The bartender stopped in front of them, and Thea was about to ask her new acquaintance what she'd like when she realized she didn't know her name. So, Lauren, she supplied. Hi, Lauren. I'm Thea, she smiled. What can I get you? A lemon drop with a sugar rim, please. The bartender nodded and disappeared. You're into sweet things, then? Thea asked. Not necessarily, Lauren replied, and Thea knew she'd met someone special already. But you are into women. Thea didn't feel like wasting her time on a beautiful straight girl. She'd betted plenty of those, and she hadn't found them worth the trouble afterward. Not that she had any afterward in mind, but still, not necessarily, Lauren repeated as the bartender dropped off her drink and walked away. Really? See, I was hoping you spoke to me originally because you were feeling bad that I got dumped in a first date, because you wanted to join me for a drink, because you're into women. Thea feigned sadness. But I'm wrong, huh? I didn't say that, Lauren said as she sipped her drink. Thea took that as the green light to continue flirting. Well then, in that case, I was just dumped on a first date. Seriously? Lauren asked, shocked. No, Avni's boyfriend got locked outside in his boxer briefs, Thea replied. Though I'm sad she had to leave, I'm glad to have met you, Lauren of the fancily dressed people. Oh, this old thing? Lauren motioned to an amazing dress, and Thea let her eyes linger on the fabric that hugged Lauren's curves, just so. If this is one of your old things, then I'd be happy to watch you model some of your newer articles of clothing, Thea said. When Lauren didn't flinch at the comment, she dialed up her flirtation a few notches. Or less clothing. That could be arranged, Lauren smiled before looking at the sugar on the rim of her glass. All of Thea's worries from before disappeared at the quick flick of that pink tongue. Lauren had all her attention, and suddenly Avni's playful prediction that she would get laid sooner rather than later felt like it was a lot more likely. Lauren wasn't quite sure what had come over her, but she was thoroughly enjoying this exchange with Thea. Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was those steely blue eyes and the way Thea's long dark hair framed her face in the sexiest way. Or maybe it was just because she hadn't been flirted with like this in a long time. But something about their easy banter was getting her hot and making her move faster than she normally would. I'm starting to think my friend leaving me alone at the bar was the best thing that could have happened to me. Thea's lips were full and inviting. There was something about the way she purred those words that made Lauren want to jump her on the spot, which was ridiculous since she'd just met her. But Lauren could feel the chemistry between them like an electrical current. She wanted to know if Thea's touch would feel the same way. The best thing, Lauren asked. She could think of a few things that were more enjoyable. Well, not the best thing, I suppose. Thea dropped her hand from the bar to tug at the short hem of Lauren's dress. The touch was innocent enough, but Lauren felt her excitement build nonetheless. I'm sure we could find a few suitable alternatives, Lauren said as she stilled Thea's hand on her thigh, holding it in place. If you're over being left, that is. So over it. Thea licked her lips as she gently squeezed Lauren's thigh. Lauren bit her bottom lip in response. Thea's touch was gentle but firm. She wondered what else her touch could make her feel. Good. Then I'm glad she's gone, Lauren said as she slid Thea's hand a little farther up her thigh. Me too. Thea leaned in, cupping Lauren's jaw with her free hand. Her touch was cool. Lauren could feel the droplets of condensation transferred from Thea's glass along her jaw. One slow droplet tickled along her neck as it plunged towards her chest. Has anyone ever told you have the most gorgeous mouth? Lauren exhaled as Thea stroked her thumb along her jaw. You should see what it's capable of. Thea moaned. Show me. And that's where you're going to stop because you have to read the book. So I will tell you that that's like chapter 2. So I think we know where this book's going to go. So have all you authors come on back and let's chit chat a little bit. Hi, guys. You survived your reading? Yes. Go ahead and take your mute off. This book is a little different for me because I start this book with a one-night stand. If you didn't catch that on right away. Jane, tell us about this book that's coming up and what sort of inspired you and got you to write this. Just take your mute off, please.
This book, I think, came from a question for me. I really love royal romances and royal gossip. And I think that part of my love is actually like the fascination with all the things that I hate, like the classism and like this, like just gross rules about gender. And so what would happen if someone wasn't a prince or a princess was like the question that I wanted to explore with this book. And then along the way, we have like this American grad student who's majoring in women and gender studies, not majoring, she's getting a PhD, she has a major. But she's getting a PhD in women and gender studies. And so she's really bristles at all of the like pomp and circumstance. And so through her, I get to like express all my distaste, but at the same time, like her, I'm going on this fantasy of like exploring this kingdom and the royalty and the royal family. And so we also get to revel in it, even as we're maybe poking fun at it a little bit. So the scene we had, they're in Boston, right? But very shortly after that, they are on the plane and they're on their way to the fictional country where they stay for the rest of the book.
It's so cool to have that dynamic already built in because you have like an insta angst, right? Like we know one character is 100% against this and the other one's like kind of involved because they're like in the line for the throne, but at the same time, sort of, you know, pushing against those barriers and those limitations. And you have it all, you know, right from the start. One of us doesn't like this. One of us is begrudgingly go along with it. And then what happens when we cross paths more fully? Like that's so cool. I'm excited. It's a great storyline to start with. All right, Jesse, tell me a little bit about you. So this is an interesting topic. This is, you know, a little serious. It's a little involved. It's pretty heady. I like it. I'm on there. I can get up there with you. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so this is the second in sort of a loosely tied together series. They're thematically tied together. They're based on the Serenity Prayer. So for people who aren't familiar, it's serenity to accept the things you cannot change, the courage to change the things that you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So Serenity came out. This is courage, and wisdom is forthcoming. So courage is about a social worker and a police officer who are paired up, and the social worker's job is to kind of go out on these calls where mental health or substance use issues are suspected and be the the de-escalating force there, where maybe a police presence isn't really needed, but somebody's called 911 and said, hey, we need the police here. But maybe there's a better way to kind of de-escalate that. When I thought of this idea, years ago, it was sort of less in the news and present. And then it became incredibly timely as I was writing it over the summer. And, I was able to incorporate some real world things that were brought, kind of more to the forefront of my consciousness as I was watching the news and watching people protesting after George Floyd was murdered. And, I felt like in a very tiny way, I was kind of able to bring into this book without making it like a political book or, preaching to people, but just being able to kind of as an author, put in some maybe things that made people think. And it certainly made me think in different ways about the way that I was writing. But I also was very conscious of, this is a romance. I don't want it to be, a political science book or something like that. So I tried to keep the humor and I tried to keep it a romance and hopefully towed that line pretty well.
Well, I commented in the chat that you said tits, so I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah,
personally. You got to keep it light. It's important to draw in some of real life, but also to give it a little bit of a distance so that you can kind of escape it if you want to. And I'll come back. I have a really important question about your process next after we talk to Genevieve and see how the writing went, because we all wrote these books during a pandemic. So, all right, so Genevieve, tell me about this. This story sounds so interesting. I'm so jazzed about this book.
Thank you. So how did I come up with it? Is that the question?
Yeah. Where was your, tell me a little bit about the process.
Well, at the time I was really craving some Kepta Duona. I'd missed Lithuania. I have a lot of family there and we used to visit it all the time. Well, not all the time, but fairly often when I was younger, and I haven't been back in like a decade. So I was feeling all nostalgic and kind of homesick, but not exactly the correct word. So I just wanted to write about that. And then also at the time, as I actually didn't write this during the pandemic, I was dating somebody who wasn't out to their family. And so a lot of that advice and talking to them ended up in this book, as it's somewhat of a coming out story for one of the characters. So there's just a lot there.
That's great. So when did you write this book?
I wrote this was the first book I finished after I got my first book published.
Oh, nice. So kind of drawing back on that, please unmute yourselves, guys, so I have to this. So I wrote this book during the pandemic. I was about 2/3 of the way through, and then the pandemic hit, and then everything sort of changed. And I know Jesse and I have little kids, and that made it very challenging to make sure we could write and stay inspired and stay on our deadline. So how did the process of getting this book published change for you, or get more challenging, or be impacted by the change in the world?
I can speak to that for myself. I think there was time management was completely different. It was like everything was suddenly happening in my house, where I used to have a little breathing room, but now I was working at home. My kids were home. My wife was home. My dog was annoyed that we were all home, so she was grumpy. So I found that, instead of being able to write, maybe at my lunch hour at work, or, kind of more relaxed in the evening, like my best writing time was suddenly between like 10:30 and midnight, which meant that, because that was the only time the house was quiet, which meant that my sleep was impacted, but that was like the time that I could squeeze out. It was sort of the only time where I felt like I could just put everything away too. It was like I didn't have to be worrying about wiping everything down and whether my kids had their hands up their nose. And it just, that was the time where I felt like I could shut my brain off enough to kind of get the space to write. And then over the summer, when, there was so much unrest, and amazing protests, and people calling attention to police brutality and racial injustice, I feel like that added kind of another layer on top, which would have, I think, been true regardless, but especially timely with this book that I was writing. So that felt like I had to kind of stop and digest some of that, because it happened very much while I was writing it and doing some editing. So then that was just another kind of, I needed to give myself a little brain space for that on top of the pandemic.
Yeah, understandable. Wow, that's a lot. What about you, Jane? How'd it go for you?
I second what Jesse said about the pressures of the pandemic, the marching, the following the news constantly. I mean, that was just stressful to be, because this book I turned in, I think July 1st, I turned the manuscript in. So it was like the early part of the pandemic, I was scrambling to finish and revise the draft to submit to my editor. And there's just a lot going on. But I think in terms of like my life, the hardest thing was just having a loss of space. So we had moved and we had sold all of our furniture because we couldn't afford to ship it. And we thought, well, eventually we'll be able to buy more furniture, but we were broke. And then also like the stores were all closed. And so suddenly I was like in an apartment with like a bed and a couch and nothing else. So there was a lot of like laptop in bed with me nights and like falling asleep and waking up and my computer is like on my pillow next to me. And it's just not comfortable. Like I'm a kind of person who really likes a designated workspace and I like to sit at a desk and feel like I'm being professional in that way. I don't like comfy writing. So for me, that was just really hard, just like physically adjusting to the new world. But I have more furniture now, not much, but a little more. I have a chair. I'm on an actual chair. So
I'm very excited for you to have a chair. Yeah, I think this is one of the things that's interesting is that this was a heavy year. It was a heavy 4 years and it was a heavy last year. And I can only speak for myself to say, but writing fiction, romantic fiction, especially where we're drawing out a happy ever after in a time that feels very unhappy and ever after, never ending. I think it's a hard time to write romance. And I think for me, this year was a challenge because I want to continue to bring those stories, but the weight of the difficulties around us and how heavy life has definitely been a challenge. How do you think the community or the other writers that you deal with have helped you kind of pull through that to be able to stick on to your deadlines and your inspiration?
I mean, not being able to go to events. I know, Fiona, you and I have been at Pride events together, and there's a really nice community of authors that the pandemic, like, we can't be in person. And I felt that acutely this year. The community of authors that we have built up is really a great source of support. But I do feel like there's been, I think through these kind of Zoom, meetings, it's a weird thing to see people in these little tiny boxes, but I've been able to connect with other authors, which I think is really nice. And you start to kind of find the people that you can bounce ideas off of, whether they're other authors, whether they're people that you trust in your circle. That like one friend that if you ask them, they're going to just say, oh, it's amazing, or, oh God, this is the worst thing. And that's not the person to go to. You don't need somebody who's going to tell you that everything you do is fantastic, because that's not actually helpful. Good for your ego, but not great. So I think I started to develop kind of a pseudo little support group for writing. And my wife is just amazing. She'd be like, I know you've got to write tonight, so I'll put the kids to bed. And then you hear them screaming downstairs and you're like, I should go down. I have to finish this chapter. I should go down. I have to finish this chapter. And I'd show up and she'd be like, get back upstairs. You're not done. I know you're not. So that's been really helpful, is having a good support system.
Great. Awesome. Genevieve, you got a question over here about the midnight market. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I was actually just typing a response to it.
Okay, great.
The community center is what the market's called. It's this is my third book that takes place there. I will hold it up again, A Fairy Tale. And I am working on several other books that will also take place there. So yeah, definitely still revisiting it.
And this is a common world thing, right? So there's multiple books that come back to the same hub. I think that's fantastic. Jane, do you have any other royal romances in your future, or was this a stretch for you, or what do you think?
No, I think that what interests me is playing with tropes. So my first book was a road trip. This royal romance. My next one's going to be fake relationship. I like having fun with the tropes, but I just want to piggyback on something that you and Jesse have kind of both said, that I had the same sense of like, am I writing this really frivolous thing? I mean, it's about like a fake monarchy, and like people having like really fancy dinners. And thankfully there's always someone who's like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? This is bad. this is classist. This is wrong, in like all the chapters, which is maybe annoying for some readers. But it kind of helped me. But also, my writing buoys me in hard times. And I think that's true for most writers. And I think for most readers, I don't have to tell you guys this, you're here for a reason, because we know that romance uplifts us when life is really hard and shitty and things seem like they're going bad. It gives us like a place to go. And so for me, like writing about the most ridiculous, most fantastical, Cinderella story was kind of a really nice break from all of the doom and gloom. But I don't think I need that anymore. So I think the next one can probably be set in the real world because life has gotten a little bit better, right? For many of us. Not for everybody.
For some of us, yeah, I completely agree. I think you're absolutely right. There's an escapism necessary for me. It's it's cathartic to write something I know that's going to have a happy ever after. Jesse, there's a question in the Q&A. Michelle just finished her book and wants to know if race of the characters was something that you considered when writing the story.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes. And so in Wisdom, I was much more conscious of being a little active with identifying the race of the characters, honoring the race of the characters, being not just like a dumb white author who's like, oh, I'm not going to talk about this because everybody's just white, which is really easy to do. Because if you're a white author and you're not mentioning it, then it's easy to just assume that everybody's white. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm also not going to just talk about the one Black character in my book and not, make a conscious effort of identifying sort of the beautiful racial makeup of the entire book, because it's in a city, so everybody's not white. And I feel like this was pointed out to me by somebody who I respect, and I kind of am embarrassed that I haven't done this before. So I completely own my own just, white privilege on this, and just being able to kind of blindly not think about those things before. And so I was much more conscious about that in Wisdom. And one of my characters is a Black woman, one of the main characters. And because it's ridiculous that in a big city that there wouldn't be characters who are racial and ethnic minorities. So yes, it is something that I addressed, and I wish that I had done it a little bit better, a little bit earlier.
Thank you. Thank you for being so candid about that. Go ahead, Genevieve.
Yeah, I didn't as much with this book because it was based in Eastern European mythology. But for Olivia, I had a Black and lead, and then the love interest is Asian, and it dealt a lot with racial stuff, and I've been trying to do that in more books. But I actually donated like a bunch of the profits from that one to BLM and bail funds.
That's great. I think it's really important for us all to be present. And I think that's the best part about the story, where you have fairies involved, and then Jane is talking about like this fictional, royal family. It's important for us to still bring life in and to find a way to soften some of the harder message, but still bring that message through. So I know it's challenging to do as an author. It's definitely something that we get into lazy little habits that we do, and it's certainly putting ourselves out there. So I applaud everybody that does that. It's something I try to do every day and try to change and try to teach my kids about. So when you're writing your stories in fiction, it's a lot to juggle. So I appreciate that. And I hope the readers appreciate the work that we try. We're doing the best we can. So we have just about enough time to talk about what's next. So if you just want to come on and tell me what's next for you after this book, and what can we be looking forward to? Jane, how about we start with you?
Yeah, I said that my next was a fake relationship. I'm working on something about someone who is friends with a reality TV producer who gets roped into participating in a show when somebody drops out and has to pretend she's in a relationship so that they can go to series with this show that doesn't have enough characters, enough participants. I'm also working on this really light paranormal where someone moves into an apartment and it's haunted by the ghost of the person who lived there before. And it sort of leads them on this quest to investigate like what happened to this person. Why is their ghost still lingering? We'll see what comes of either of these. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm good. They sound great. I'm on. I'll buy it. Let's go. Genevieve, what's next with you?
Well, I'm about to be working on another vampire novel. Sandy has been very interested in getting more vampire books from me.
That's a compliment. It means you don't suck. Oh, bad jokes.
Only
Those
blood.
are free. Those are free on Sundays. All right, Jesse, what about you? What's coming down the pike?
So I'm finishing up this trio of books. So Wisdom will be coming out in December. And then I think after that, I'm going to write something that's a little bit less current event-y. But I always seem to bring in messy, complicated characters. So I can't seem to avoid that. I don't know, but probably something a little bit less like in the moment, current events. I don't know. Maybe I'll do something a little weird, and it'll probably be a little bit lighter, maybe a little more action heavy than going back to some things that I've written before.
It's all great. So I'm really stoked about it. I'm looking forward to going back to Prides with you, Jesse. I want to stand in a tent and get burned by the sun and get dedehydrated next to water, if we could do that.
Yeah. Those days make memories. I can argue with that.
Any Pride coming back. I miss Pride so much. We need to be in person and have that community, right?
I know. I think that's one of the hardest things about this pandemic is like our community is sort of small anyway, but that's been the wonderful thing about these sort of events where we can reconnect with people or connect for the first time with people who normally we wouldn't see. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to still do things like this and then also get back in person. I hope we do both because I think we reach a different community in like a setting like this, in a format like this, and it gives us the opportunity to see and meet more people. So my book is out May 1st, Bet the Farm. And then the third and last book of the series is Beginner's Bet, and that comes out in September. And then I'm wrapping up my second full series, which I always jump into a series getting excited about. And then I think I'm crazy for doing that. And then I love it. So I hope you guys stick around. The third book is for Ellison. First book was Trina's, second book is Lawrence, and the last book is Ellison's. It's going to wrap up the story and kind of catch you up with everyone. So I just want to thank everyone for coming and watching us and participating in the Bookathon. This is going to be the last event for the Bookathon, but if you were here, thank you so much for participating and for your questions and for all the chat roles. Thank you for being and supporting us and always coming by. I want to remind you that you're welcome for my craziness, Michelle. I will always bring that to the party. But let us know all the things you love. And thank you again for showing up. We can't thank you enough. Without you, there'd be none of these. And without these and writing, we would be nowhere but in our basement like Jane. But she has a chair, so we're good. So thanks again. Thank you so much. Thank you, authors, for hanging out with me. And hopefully we'll see you again. Bold Strokes will be doing another one of these soon. So keep your eye on the newsletter and for all updates. And again, we thank you so much. So have a great night, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.